Let's take a few moments and overview Layer 7. Layer 7 is closest to the end user. And so at Layer 7, an end user would have a software application, and that software application is what interacts directly with the protocol stack, allowing it to have network connectivity. So Layer 7 of the OSI model is called the application layer. Some examples of what we might see as an end user at the application layer include a web browser with access to a website, or a command line terminal, as you see here, which is allowing me an interface to access a server remotely. It might also include a client like this, which allows me to check my email. Additionally, it could include applications that provide management capabilities for me. Now, each of these would be an example of what we might see up at the application layer of the OSI model that gives us the ability to interact with the protocol stack and use these protocol stacks or these protocols to communicate on the network. Now let's take a look at Layer 6. Layer 6 is responsible for translating between the format that the application understands and works with and various formats to the network. We call this layer the presentation layer. So when you think about this layer from a networking perspective, just understand that it's a translator. It would also be responsible for formatting and encrypting data that we plan to send across the network. So some examples that would happen at this presentation layer would be to convert between EBCDIC coded text files and ASCII coded text files, or JPEG, or to serialize objects and other data structures to and from an XML format, which is a very popular format that we use to transfer data, oftentimes inside of an HTTP connection or HTTPS connection, as would be the case with our intrusion prevention systems. Moving on to Layer 5 of the OSI model. Layer 5 is the session layer, providing a way to open, close, and manage a session between the end user application processes. So think about opening a application on your machine, and that invokes a process. So that process that's running decides it needs to send some data. So the protocol stack needs to interact with that process to be able to transfer the data between the application and the network. And that is what the session layer is responsible for. So it establishes, manages, and terminates these connections between an application on the local end and an application on the remote end. So it provides full duplex connectivity, which means that it can transmit and receive at the same time. It can also provide half duplex or simplex operation, meaning we're only sending traffic in one way. It establishes checkpointing, adjournment, termination, and restart procedures as well. Now, going into the details of this is beyond the scope of this class, but just understand that at Layer 5, Layer 6, and Layer 7, we typically refer to these as application capabilities. And so as a networking professional, we don't deal with them often, but as a security professional, they might cross over into our realm more often than just general networking. So Layer 5 is also responsible for closing a session gracefully, which is something that TCP does for us. Now, TCP is the transmission control protocol, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. TCP is a protocol that operates at Layer 4 of the OSI model, not at Layer 5. So The session layer, as I mentioned, is typically something that we see in the application environment. We don't see it in the networking world as often, or we don't deal with it in the networking world as often, but it uses remote procedure calls for communication.